Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Can they make an Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder fight for April, even if they wanted to? It's a big question swirling around right now as a result of talk of a two-way rematch being in place for Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. Those two fight later this year. Also, another question that's sort of bubbled up and is taking hold is, what sort of offer is it going to take to get Shelley Finkel to agree to meet with Matchroom chairman Barry Hearn? Because Finkel is refusing to sit down with Hearn right now unless he gets what he calls a real offer. Also, the results of Anthony Joshua's Twitter poll are in about who he wants to face next or who fans want him to face next. And it's all coming up Wilder. I'll get to that shortly, as well as some of the thoughts on the ding-dong that Barry Hearn and Frank Warren have had on British radio, including some comments from Warren, who believes that if Fury beats Wilder, he could face Joshua in April. But first, I'll start with the potential Wilder and Fury rematch snag. That's a narrative that's starting to take hold, and I had several comments on it, the two-way rematch clause in the comment section of my previous video on this topic. As far as I can ascertain, the talk of a two-way rematch, it's come from a tweet from Tom Kershaw. He's a sports journalist for The Independent, and he's made that tweet citing Fury's trainer Ben Davison, saying both Fury and Wilder have a rematch clause. And that would potentially mean Joshua and Wilder for April just can't happen. Well, on the surface, that's the way it does appear. Neither Wilder, Fury, or their management have, as yet at the time of this upload, confirmed or refuted the information in that tweet. But it's certainly starting to spread around, especially on the YouTube boxing community, like wildfire. But if it is correct, then fans and YouTubers potentially could have been spinning their wheels, getting into a lather for days on this topic, and there potentially can be no payoff, regardless of what's being said about a potential Joshua and Wilder fight. And that would beg the question, if there's a two-way rematch in place and it has to take place, why hasn't this whole thing been squashed? After all, Shelley Finkel has been in the media around the negotiation aspect side of things, and I'll get to his comments shortly. I mean, the simple answer for me about this two-way rematch and why it wouldn't have been squashed is it generates more noise, more expectation, there's more headlines, everyone's talking about a big mega fight. And obviously Tyson Fury, he wants his name to be thrown into that mix too. It's another brick in the wall for either a Wilder-Joshua fight or a Wilder-Fury fight. Every little bit helps, builds it over time, makes it bigger and bigger. But if true there is a two-way rematch clause in the contract, it is actually a bit surprising, to me at least. It makes sense for Wilder as the champion to have a rematch clause. It is a voluntary defence after all. But for Fury, not so much. But perhaps a two-way rematch clause was needed to get Fury and Warren to agree to the fight. It would also recognise Fury's lineal status, which Fury's been reminding us all about any opportunity he gets. So it'll be interesting to see where all this goes, because if it's true, we can probably forget about a Wilder-Joshua fight for April. Well, that's, what it looks like. You would think that either one would exercise their rematch clause. But if it's not true, how does it explain the tweet? Okay, next, Shelley Finkel says he won't be sitting down with Barry Hearn to negotiate unless he receives a real offer first. He's been quoted by Sky Sports as saying, "I have sent 3 separate emails to Barry saying I have no desire to meet with Barry unless I have a real offer for Wilder to meet Joshua. He and I have been in the business long enough to know what the offer would look like. Team Joshua does not care what fight the public that supports them wants. If they did, they would follow the poll they created to determine who the public wants Joshua to fight next. The public spoke and Joshua hid. Where is the new offer? Nowhere to be found." Some of the language from Finkel, it's going to be like a red rag to a bull for a lot of Joshua fans. And to be fair to Anthony Joshua, the poll has only just closed. So Finkel was out of the media making these statements, as the poll had just closed. Didn't give Joshua any opportunity to hide. But in terms of that poll, more on that soon. But putting Finkel's inflammatory language aside, I actually think he does have a point about getting an offer before they meet. I don't actually think that's unreasonable given the circumstances, which are the negotiations are starting afresh. Joshua and his team are effectively now chasing the fight given their recent statements that they've made about wanting a Wilder fight for April. So I don't believe it's unreasonable for them to send some sort of an offer, which will then get the respective sides around the table. And judging by my last video, I'm sure I'm about to get quite a fair few comments now referencing the previous negotiations, the $15 million offer, a contract being on Wilder's desk and a pen being missing, so on and so forth. But the reality is, that whole melodrama is behind us now. These are new negotiations. So what happened before shouldn't influence what's happening now. And given it all fell over before, do we really want to repeat that? We don't want that template because it didn't work out. Plus Eddie Hearn, he's freely acknowledging now that the fight is now bigger than it would have been previously. And Wilder's commercial value, it's also on the rise. I don't think we can ignore those things. My read on Finkel saying they've been in the business long enough to know what the offer would look like. It's effectively a warning shot not to waste his time with a lowball offer. And judging by Finkel's previous behaviour, he'll be in the media in a heartbeat if he perceives the offer to be low. You know he will. It's happened before. And if it did happen, Finkel would be saying stuff like, they've offered us a flat fee, they don't want the fight. That narrative would get some traction, get some legs in the media, and Wilder's vociferous supporters would be piling in behind it too. I'm sure you can imagine it now, and it would spark off a whole who's ducking who thing. So Joshua and his team do need to think carefully about any tabled offer, because there could be some reputational issues to consider with this. And in any case, there's no guarantee Wilder's team take a meeting for what many would deem a fair offer anyway. And we've all got our own views about what a deal could look like and what's fair. But what's fair to you and I may not be what's fair to Deontay Wilder, Shelley Finkel and co. A lot of moving parts here, and it's not straightforward. Anthony Joshua Twitter poll. So the results of who his next opponent should be from the fans, as expected, and what we expected, Deontay Wilder, the winner with 53% of the 487,000 votes. Tyson Fury, 42%. Dillian Whyte, a very distant third, 5%. I'll be interested to hear Joshua or Hearn's take on that, the thoughts on that result. Is it actually going to count for something here, or will it just end up being a bit of a PR stunt that generated a few but predictable headlines? I think the majority of people knew the result was going to be Deontay Wilder before the poll went up, so you can argue, was there really a point to doing the poll? What did you make of it? Who did you vote for and why? And probably one of the more interesting interviews that I've heard in recent weeks is Barry Hearn and Frank Warren going at it on BBC 5 Live, with it ending on the note of Barry Hearn saying he wouldn't be coming back onto the program in future. And I recommend, if you haven't heard that, go search it out because it is entertaining. Barry Hearn is being interviewed, and then partway through, Frank Warren parachutes in and he begins to needle Hearn immediately. He throws out the "you're an accountant" line, and the end result of it, which Warren seemed to be pleased with, is Hearn stated they would make a fight with either Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder for April, subject to terms. And that was the thing that Hearn kept stressing, subject to terms. And Warren, he suggested a 50-50 split for Tyson Fury for a fight with Anthony Joshua, and Hearn just sort of ruled that out immediately, said they would never do that. And also, as part of the interview, Frank Warren, he indicated that a rematch, should Fury beat Wilder, wouldn't necessarily stop Fury from fighting Joshua in April. And the interviewer who was asking the questions, of Warren, he legitimately asked this because obviously this has been a thought on people's mind. If Fury wins, he will fight Wilder in a rematch. That's just, what a lot of people have thought. It's logical, it makes sense. But Frank Warren, and I'm going to quote him here, says, everybody is sensible enough to make the big fights happen. And there are always ways to make things happen. So I don't believe there's anything to stop that fight from happening. The only thing that would stop the fight happening is Anthony Joshua's people. Those were Frank Warren's words. Very interesting stuff, and no doubt there's going to be a lot of people sort of scoffing right now at the suggestion that Wilder wouldn't want his rematch if he lost to Tyson Fury. I think Wilder would take a rematch immediately and enforce that. So I think a lot of people will probably be sort of calling bullshit on Frank Warren, going, really? Does that sound credible? He says everybody is sensible enough to make the big fights happen. Well, a rematch between Wilder and Fury would be a huge fight, and I think they'd be jumping at that first. Let's be realistic about it. What did you make of it? Tell me what you think of Frank Warren's comments there. Also, Shelley Finkel not agreeing to meet with Barry Hearn. What sort of offer should they table? Is there a risk that if they do lowball them, that they're going to get torched in the media by Finkel and Wilder? Also, the poll, was it as you expected? 53% to Wilder, 42% to Fury, and Dillian White way back in the weeds on 5%. Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.